Welcome to MOCO Pride. I'm your host, Phillip Alexander Downie, and today we're sitting down with Dr. Amena Johnson, the LGBTQ Liaison from Montgomery County. Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So first off, can you tell us exactly what the LGBTQ Liaison does for Montgomery County?
Absolutely. The LGBTQ liaison is the liaison between the county executive and the community in Montgomery County, the LGBTQ community specifically, but also the community, parents of LGBTQ kids and teachers, people that teach LGBTQ students and things like that. So what I do is I take the concerns of the community, the LGBTQ community and their allies back to the county executive's office. I also put together an LGBTQ advisory group. Right now, we have about 8 members, maybe 9. We can have up to 25. We'd love to have a couple more. So if anybody that's listening wants to be a part, we'll be happy to have you. And so that group works on projects that are of interest to the county. So we take information to the county executive, but also sometimes we do projects. For example, we're going to be working with Pride to hopefully host an event and, any other things that you're doing. So that's what we do.
Awesome. And so can you tell me some of the concerns that you have had to deal with that have been incoming to your office since you started the position?
So I started the position in January, so I haven't been there that long. But I can tell you one of the first things that I've worked on is actually I've talked to some seniors, LGBTQ seniors in our community, and they talked about not feeling safe to come out in long-term care facilities, those of them that are in retirement homes, maybe even nursing homes. And, not everybody, but I've heard some stories of people who were out, before they went into these long-term facilities and then they went in the closet when they went into those long-term facilities. And I thought that was, wow, I was kind of shocked at that. And so one of the first things I did was I created just a 1-pager infographic about some best practices for folks that work with LGBTQ seniors and older adults. And so that's one of the first things that we've done. The other thing that we're hoping to put out, the advisory group is hoping to put out by the end of Pride Month, is a resource list of resources that we have in Montgomery County for LGBTQ people. So those are 2 of the projects that we're working on.
Wow, that is amazing and so interesting to hear that someone, depending on the community, that they would have to go back into the closet. I mean, I know that in some spaces that I may go into that if what's presenting queer, you know what I mean? And so it's like sometimes, do you feel safe to present as queer in those spaces? And that is so interesting. I have, do you know Dr. Lorraine Hutchins?
Yes, I know. Yes.
She recently went into not recently, a few years ago, into a Quaker community. And even though she feels safe enough to come out, but she said that she has to be loud and make and make changes.
Lorraine is actually on the advisory group, and so Lorraine sent me some information. Lorraine wasn't the person that I'd heard it from, but Lorraine was not surprised. And the thing that we found out was that it wasn't necessarily that these homes are not safe, like they're saying disparaging things or having anti-LGBTQ sentiments around. It's just that they aren't necessarily saying that they're welcoming either, right? And so if you don't know that a place is welcoming, and it's, especially if you didn't grow up in a time where people were out comfortably, then you might make that decision to go back in the closet. So it really is about, making sure that there are things with, LGBTQ couples around, like on posters and that sort of thing, that you use affirming language, that you are actually letting people know that you're welcoming it. Because I didn't find in the people that I talked to that people are like, oh no, we don't want LGBTQ people here. That wasn't the case. It just is that, heteronormativity and cis-sexism exist, and people just are not thinking like, oh, I guess I shouldn't have all straight couples, or I shouldn't ask about your husband or your wife. You know what I mean? And so, maybe you ask a man about his wife, a woman about her husband. So That's what I found. And it's just these little tweaks of things that people can do. But Lorraine is great.
I love it. I love it. No, I completely get that sentiment too. I've heard people were just like, "Oh, your wife," and I said, "My husband,"
Right. Yep.
and you just have to correct him and keep him moving. But
Yep.
yeah, that's wonderful. So uh, with this position, you get to meet so many amazing people and leaders throughout the
Hmm.
community. So can you tell me about your interactions dealing with the different communities that exist within the queer community?
Sure. Like I said, I haven't had a lot of interaction because
Yes.
it's only been 6 months. Um, but I think, I work a lot with Lee Blender and I've talked to Lee and work with the trans community. And that has been a great experience. I want to make sure that we center trans folks all the time. I want to make sure that we center Black trans folks, in particular Black trans women. That is always at the top of our mind because I think if we take care of Black trans women, we actually end up taking care of a lot of other folks in the LGBTQ community. And so I've actually been talking to Vanessa, and I cannot remember Vanessa's last name, who is a young trans person in the community. And like I said, I've been working with Lee and thinking about ways we're going to reach out to the trans community. We haven't set anything in stone yet. Like I said, been working with LGBTQ older adults, um, who, of course, their identities range across the LGBTQ community, and we've done some things for them. And have worked with young people. Started doing some work with MCPS. I was a speaker at the town hall, and have talked to a few people there about the needs that are in MCPS. And what I've heard is that for the most part, students feel safe, but there's still more to do. And teachers need more training and I think something that happens as that people go, well, we know the acronym, we know to ask people their pronouns, we're great, we're great, and there's like like a little bit more push. And so hopefully going to be working with them to do some training and that sort of thing. So those are the communities that I've worked with so far.
Wonderful. So you touched on this a little bit, but a lot of people don't know why it's so important to put not only trans people on the forefront, but Black trans women and trans people of color on
Hmm.
the forefront. Tell me a little bit why that's so important.
Well, I say center Black trans women because, first of all, trans people in general, no matter their race, are at most at risk in the LGBTQ community. And Black trans women in particular are the people that are getting killed in hate crimes more than other trans folks. Um, and so that's why I say center Black trans women, because we want to keep them alive. We want to keep them safe. We want to keep all trans people safe. But I am of the firm belief that if you center the most marginalized, then we all benefit. And when I think about the LGBTQ community, in my mind, trans people, in particular Black trans women, definitely trans women, are the most marginalized. And as a cisgender woman, cisgender lesbian, if I am making sure that my trans siblings are looked out for, then I am looked out for. What's good for them is good for me. And so that's first and foremost, want to make sure people are not dying and that people are safe and that they can have the jobs, the experiences, and the education that they want, that they choose, as opposed to being either not having a job and not having stable housing, but also making sure that they're really safe. So that's why.
That is so important and amazing work, and I thank you for that because,
Mhm.
like you said, we like to work backwards,
Yep.
and then everybody is taken care
Yep.
of. So it is Pride Month,
Hmm.
and so tell me what Pride Month means to you.
So, Pride Month, it's interesting now that Juneteenth is a federal holiday and is in June. Um, because Pride Month means freedom, freedom and speaking out for yourself. So I think I just recently gave a speech for the city of Gaithersburg about Pride Month and Juneteenth together and how they're related. And it's like, it's about freedom, the freedom to be who you are, to express yourself in any way that you want. I happen to love summer. So, but I think, Pride Month represents freedom. But I also think, because a lot of people don't know about LGBTQ History Month, which is in October, but I think Pride Month is also a way to get to our history and know who we are. as LGBTQ people, because we do have a history, and LGBTQ people have been here since the beginning of time. LGBTQ people of color actually were really prominent in the Stonewall riots and the riots and the civil disobedience that took place before. And so I think it's freedom. I think, to say who you are and express yourself, but also I think history and to look back on those that came before us.
Absolutely. For National Coming Out Day, I've been trying to flip it on its head and say, like, coming out's antiquated. We just need to live in our truth. And so, what does living in your truth mean to you?
In my own
Yes, in
personal
your
truth,
own truth.
living in my own truth is, of the conversation we had before. I have a wife, and, to be able to say wife, for me, it's not everybody, lots of people say partner or spouse, but to be able to say that I have a wife, um, to be able to be, a lot of my identity, is wrapped around my lesbian identity, but also my Black identity, my female identity, and to be able to come into spaces as all of those things at the same time. And so the joke I often tell is, I wish I could wake up and look at the news and go, you know what? I'm not going to be Black today. Just going to be a woman, be a lesbian. And then maybe at noon, I check the news again. So, got to turn that off, be something else. And so living in my truth means able to come into a room in any space and be all of those things at the same time and have that, because that's unique to me. And another woman who has these same identities may have another truth to tell.
Tell me about your wife a little bit. I want to get to know you more.
Sure. My wife's name is Nikki Brooks. She is an artist and an art teacher. She always makes me say artist first, because if I'll say, oh, she's an art teacher and artist, she'll be like, nope, I'm an artist first. But she's an artist and an art teacher. She teaches elementary school, and she does work. You can check her out on NicoleIbrooks.com. I gave her a plug. She'll be very happy about that. But you can see the art that she does. She does a lot of social justice artwork, and actually, in a lot of her work recently, she has been trying to center trans Black women that we have lost. And so she'll put them in some of the works that she does, because she wants people to remember, who they are. And we're both of the idea that, we center them, then we help everyone out. But a lot of social justice work for trans folks, for Black folks, for women. And yeah, that's who she is.
So, how can Montgomery County be more inclusive, not just of the LGBTQ community, but of the minority communities that surround it as well?
One of the things that I heard from several people not before, but when I started this position was Montgomery County is one of the most diverse counties. So you would think it would be open, but it's not as open as people think. Um, and I think that for people to understand that diversity doesn't mean inclusion, right? And I think that is the biggest, like, lesson for not just Montgomery County, but lots of other places. But in particular, Montgomery County, since that's what we're talking about, to learn is that diversity doesn't mean inclusion. There are lots of different folks in Montgomery County. You go, like, not just, Black people and white people, but brown and all, all the colors in between, but immigrants. It's a county of immigrants. And, but to learn that just because we all live here together doesn't mean we all feel included. And what does that look like? And in order to make sure people feel included, you have to ask them. You can't just assume, like, oh, the LGBTQ people must want a pride parade. Okay, that would be fun. But there are lots of other things that LGBTQ folks want. There are lots of other things that, Muslim folks want and Asian folks want, and you have to ask them. And the great thing, though, that I actually love about Montgomery County is that there are lots of other liaisons like me. There's a liaison for the Asian community, the Caribbean community, the Muslim community. There's lots of different liaisons, and so there are probably identities that are left out because people have lots of identities, but there are a ton of liaisons in Montgomery County, and but we need to make sure folks are feeling included. So, for example, when a lot of the Asian hate and bias started to happen, the Asian liaison was very busy. And I think that some of the concerns that the Asian community took to the county executive were things that he had never heard before and things that they never said before. And I haven't been here that long, so I can't say that they hadn't been asked. Um, but there are things happening, and that's what I want to do with the LGBT community. So if folks want to contact me, I am here to listen, and I'm here to truly take your concerns to the county executive.
It's super important because when I was growing up in Montgomery County, I always felt that there weren't spaces for queer people, for the LGBTQ community. There were some spaces for Black folks, but not as many as not as intentional. And so I always think about placemaking, and then also intersectionality. And sometimes when I say that word, people don't know what exactly that means. So can you talk to me about intersectionality?
Sure. Intersectionality is a term that was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw. And she actually coined the term because she was a lawyer working for a car company that had working for some defendants that had a lawsuit against the car company. And not defendants, I'm sorry, plaintiffs, and they were Black women. And these Black women were saying that they were not hired at this job because they were Black and because they were women. And the car company was like, that's not true. We have Black people and women working here. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Well, when they dug a little deeper into it, all of the Black people that were working were men, and they were working in the plants. And all the women that were working there were white, and they were all sort of the secretary's administrative assistants. And so, the idea was, yes, you can be Black, but you need to work in a plant. But women can't work in a plant, right? And you could be a woman, but you need to be the secretary, the admin person, the front facing person. Well, that person has to be white, right? And so Black, and this is what I mean when I say, like, especially with Black trans women, if you help Black trans women, you help everybody. And so these Black women took them to court, and she coined the term intersectionality to talk about the ways that marginalized identities intersect. A lot of folks, when they think about intersectionality, they're like, oh yeah, we all have intersectionality. Everybody has, a number of identities, right? We all have a sexual orientation, a race, gender identity, all these things. That is true, but that is not intersectionality. Intersectionality is about the ways in which marginalized identities intersect, because those women, their race and their gender intersected in such a way for that company that meant that they couldn't get a job there. And so that is what that term means.
Oh, thank you. You gave it the best definition I've ever heard.
Thank you.
I mean, it's so important. I mean, being able, like you said, to show up as yourself, as your whole self. It's not just being a woman or being a Black woman or being a lesbian, like all of those together, and being able to go into a space and just be like, bam, I'm here. And also I can be accepted, because why not? We are all people who just want to be accepted. So that's wonderful. So what are your favorite things to do during Pride Month? How do you like to celebrate?
I actually love the parade. I know a lot of people don't like the parades. I say parades because there are lots of them. I love that. I love all of the discussions and, in different places around the county and around the region, there are lots of different programs. I know you just had the Black Girl Magic program. There was a discussion by Council Person Glass about homelessness in the LGBTQ community. I love all those discussions and deep discussions about things. A lot of times I learn a lot of things, especially being new to this position. It's been really good for me to try to get to as many of those things as I can, because that's how you learn the community. But just in general, the parade and those discussions, those are my favorite things. And I just like the parade because it's just fun. It just kind of takes you back to childhood. You get to have a good time. And yeah, that's what I like.
Like outside of Montgomery County, you also work in queer spaces to support them. Tell me about that work.
So I am, so I'll just say that the LGBTQ liaison is a part-time position. It's 20 hours. And so I have another job at Georgetown University, and that's why I was able to explain intersectionality so well, because I've taught that a couple times. But I work at Georgetown University as the associate director of their LGBTQ center there, and I support LGBTQ students at Georgetown University. And I've worked in higher ed before. I used to work at George Mason University in their LGBTQ center as well, supporting LGBTQ students. And so I've been working in higher ed for about 7 years and doing LGBTQ work a little bit longer than that. I actually used to work in Prince George's County supporting LGBTQ youth in foster care. And so I've had some different jobs, but always supporting LGBTQ folks.
So you just spoke about supporting LGBTQ youth in foster care. Talk to me about that, especially in Prince George's County.
So Prince George's County had a grant to do a program called Affirm, and Affirm like it's all caps, so it's not an acronym. It's a program called Affirm, and basically it's like a cognitive behavioral therapy program for LGBTQ youth and their caregivers. And what they wanted to do was see if, so Prince George's County, we all know, we kind of just had a short discussion about this before the program. There's lots of African American folks. And, the idea is that African American folks are not supportive of the LGBTQ community. And so they wanted to come, the University of Maryland was doing kind of a study. And so they gave this grant to bring a firm in to see if they can give more support to LGBTQ families of color, right? Black families in particular. And not most of the families were Black, not everybody was. But what really they found out is, and what I knew before I even walked into the position, is that all parents love their children. Almost all parents love their children, even parents, that are foster parents or parents whose kids have had to go in foster care. Something in the world has happened to kind of cut off that relationship or, put it, strain it a little bit. But all parents love their children. And if they can talk to parents and caregivers, if they're talking to foster parents, about, you don't want your child to, let's say, wear lipstick to school. Not because you don't love your child, but because you don't want your child to get bullied and harassed. And so if we can talk to parents about how what they're doing is harming their kids, most of the time we can turn that around, right? If you can look at it not as, oh, they are homophobic and they hate LGBTQ people, as actually they love their child and they're doing this behavior because they don't want their child to get hurt. And if we can talk to them about how to stop hurting their child, they will. And does it happen 100% of the time? No. But I'm going to say probably in the 90s, it happens most of the time that parents can figure out a way to not hurt their child. And while they're in that, I'm not, at least going to stop talking about the lipstick. It still bothers me, but I'm going to stop talking about it. Then we can do some education in the interim. So I hope that made sense.
No, it definitely made sense. And so, for any young LGBTQ youth, do you have any tools or I guess starting talking points that you could give them to kind of ease their parents into becoming more accepting of them?
I would say to LGBTQ youth to do your best to find a trusted adult, whether that be in your faith community, at school, but get a trusted adult that can be your ally, because that's what the Affirm program was, right? We were trusted adults to those youth, and then we were the mediaries between them and their parents and could have that conversation. So if you can find a trusted adult that you can confide in and have a conversation with, if it is, appropriate for them to be with you, to talk with your parents, I would honestly do that. Because let's face it, adults listen to adults. Right? It's not fair, but that's what happens. Adults listen to adults. But one that can talk to that adult, but also so you can have someone other than your parents, to talk to and to confide in. Because that was the other thing that we learned in Affirm, was that these parenting is a hard job. Parents are overwhelmed, excuse me. And so we live in a society where, we're in these little nuclear families and parents don't have support. So if your child has someone else that they can depend on, that can kind of take the pressure valve off of your relationship. The trusted adult, I would say, um, the internet is a great place and a dangerous place all at the same time. And so I would say that, find those trusted sites if you don't know them. I am most certainly available in Montgomery County for folks to be like, here's some resources. Um, so trusted adults, do your research. If you're living in a really remote place, you don't have a trusted adult, because there are some good, online groups. Trevor Project, is a great place to reach out to and find out. Smile, which is in DC, but also going to be working in Montgomery County. If you go to their website, that's SMYAL. If you go to their website, they will have some information and they can give you some resources. So yes, depend on your resources, and a trusted adult are the two big things. Because here's the thing: everybody for everything is always looking for that magic pill. And to be honest with you, there's not one. You have your own pill, but there's not one magic pill for everyone in anything. So if you reach out to that trusted adult, which is a resource, or find other resources.
We spoke a little bit about the Black community and communities of color, and sometimes immigrant communities, religious communities, not being as accepting
Hmm.
of queer and LGBTQ folks. Um, I know this is, where can we start to break down those stigmas?
So at my other job, I was talking to a student who was interviewing me for something, and she asked the question about the Black community and how can we talk to the Black community about LGBT folks. And the first thing I said to her is, the first thing we have to do is stop assuming that white folks own everything and that white culture is the center of LGBTQ community. I know when I came out, my cousin was like, "Oh, so now I guess you're going to be dating a white woman and everything." This idea that the only people that are LGBTQ are white. And so I think that's the first thing that we have to do, is realize that people of color in general, not just Black folks, but have been LGBTQ TQ from since time immemorial, right? Like we have always been here. you know, lesbians, transgender folks, gay folks, non-binary folks, bisexual folks, we have always been here, and we have been people of color. So that's the first thing that we have to just like get that idea out of your head. Um, and then I think a lot of times when people have this assumption about Black people or other people of color, they go immediately to religion and faith. Um, and you know, God is not about hate. I grew up Baptist in Central Virginia. Um, very conservative, very rural place, Appomattox, Virginia, for folks who may know it. And I was taught that God is love. Like, that's what I was taught. And I remember coming out to my mother, who was, very religious, and, she paused and she was just like, okay, I knew something was going on. That was her answer. And I was like, that's it. And she was like, what do you want? I said, well, you don't have anything to say. Cause I actually had just come, when I talk about pride and all the workshops, a workshop about pride. I mean, about coming out and LGBTQness in the Bible. So I was like ready to like battle her. And she went and got the Bible. And I was like, yes, I'm ready. And she brought it back, and she read a passage in Matthew. And every time I quote this, I don't know what chapter, but from Matthew, I believe. And it said, how can you hate your brother whom you see every day and love the Lord whom you've never seen? And she was like, so no love lost. So I think a lot of times, and not that it's not necessarily difficult, you know, I can only speak to my experience as a Black person talking to the Black community, but God is love. My mother told me no love lost. But also, I think the problem is the assumption that this is for white people. And we as a community need to get away from this idea that everything was invented and it's only for white people, because that takes a lot of value away from who we are, as a people. So that honestly is how I approach that. And then usually the other debates are debates that all cultures have. right? White culture, just culture in general.
Since I mean, for myself personally, I've had to have conversations about decolonized queerness,
Yes,
and
that's the word that I was looking for, decolonization. Yep.
yeah, and it's just, and it's so interesting because I'm first generation American on my dad's side, who is Jamaican,
Okay.
and unfortunately in Jamaica they still kill gay people,
Mhm.
and so that is prevalent, but it comes from the trauma born of slavery,
Mhm.
where black folks were abused and sexually abused, black
Mhm.
men by white slave masters, and so
Mhm.
that just takes it completely away. But as I always tell people, black culture did not start slavery,
No.
and and we have
No.
such a massive, rich history that is
Mhm.
thousands of years before that.
Yep.
But we're getting into our last part of our show. Is there anything else that you would like to tell our
Mhm.
audience or let them know about you?
Um, I'm a very open person. I am like honored to have been chosen to be in this position. And I want to do whatever it takes for all aspects of the LGBTQ community. I want to work with youth. I want to work with older adults. I want to work with immigrants. I want to make sure, like, I take inclusion seriously. Like we talked about decolonizing the LGBTQ community. I want to make sure that the folks in Montgomery County that are in the margins, that people may not see all the time or think about all the time, who are LGBTQ, if someone is listening to this, um, know that they can reach out to me. Feel free. Amena Johnson at Montgomery County, Maryland.gov. Reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to anyone about any topic and take that back to the county executive. And I'll say I am the first LGBTQ liaison. Our current county executive wanted this position, and so here I am. So the county executive is also open to listening. When I met with him and said, okay, what would you like to see from this group, the advisory group? What would you like, any particular things you want us to tackle and handle? And he was like, whatever you want, whatever you say you need. And so he's really open. And so I'm here to facilitate that.
Well, that is wonderful to hear. And thank you so much for joining us today. This has been another episode of MOCO Pride. Remember to love yourselves and love each other. Good night.